Credits. 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 Yes! Yes! We beat this game in a single day? Let's fucking go. I wonder if I'm the first person to beat this game. You know what's weird? I'm playing this on Xbox. Xbox shows you your achievements and the percentages if they're rare. I haven't gotten a single achievement playing this game, including the end. This game does not appear to have achievements. At the very least, it should have get popped one when I beat the game. Whatever. I don't care. Let's put this behind us. Okay. First order of business. The bottom center of the screen says that we have beaten 100 games since we started doing in 2023, and 422 since we started doing this in 2020. Those are no longer correct. We've now beaten 101 games in 2023 and 423 games since we started doing this in 2020. That is now updated. All right, so here's the deal. I'm going to take these out because this song isn't very good. Well, I'll leave one in. I might miss something. Who knows? So let's start with the good. I didn't hate the enemy design. The institution of proper, legit boss fights that were very clearly boss fights in boss arenas is something you don't always see consistently in survival horror games, and it's always a welcome addition in my book. I'll never turn down a boss fight in any genre of game. And this game had very clear bosses. And so I liked that. Those were the best parts of the game, were the boss fights. The second half of this game got a lot more linear, and I think that served the game well. When you're at an action horror game like this, where it has some weak spots with puzzles and level design, when it becomes more linear, it alleviates the issue of the issues with the puzzles, and the level design become less obvious, and so and more in the background, and so the game had a little bit more room to breathe there. And you just running around shooting things was, not horrible. It was even fun at times, a little bit. So I think the second half of the game was 50 times better than the first half of the game. So the game does get better as it goes. I warmed up to the idea. I was initially disappointed by the fact that it did not have an inventory screen or any real resource scarcity or management. You're just picking up health and ammo on the fly, and you can't hold any with you. So, resource management is usually a big part of survival horror, and that isn't an element in this game. I was initially disappointed by that. I eventually warmed up to that. There was some level of fun to be had with picking up health and ammo, knowing that you don't have to store it or worry about filling up your inventory, just picking up on the go as you're fighting or as you're exploring. Didn't hate that by the end. Some of the imagery was fairly creepy. On its face, anyway. The way it was handled made it uncreepy, but the actual imagery of some of the cutscenes and stuff was, we'll get to that in a second, was kind of cool. That's all I can think of to say that's good. But that's not nothing. It wasn't difficult. It wasn't long. And I always appreciate those kinds of things, especially in a game that I'm not enjoying that much. Okay, now, let's get through this quickly, right? Because just to rip the Band-Aid off. This is not a good game. This is I don't want to call it bad, because I don't know anything about this developer, but this might be their first video game, and this is a hell of a lot more than I've ever done with a video game, and so I don't want to shit on anyone that makes a video game. But by the standards of survival horror that we are familiar with in 2023, this is pretty bottom of the barrel, and I'll tell you why. First of all, it's not scary. It certainly does its best in certain areas. Like I said, like some of the enemy design is kind of cool. The grandma that is the main antagonist is, you know, they try to, like, when she's peeking around corners and stuff, there's something there sometimes, but unfortunately the way that they handle it, they figure out ways to ruin the scares every time. For instance, I'll give you an example. If you're walking through a dark house and you're rounding corners and you've got your flashlight, and the only thing that you point the flashlight at is what you can see, and you can't see anything else, everything around you is dark, and then grandma jumps out from behind the wall or something else, some monster or something, that's scary, right? That could be a moment where I'm like, oh my god. But that never once happened to me playing this game. This game has a lot of jump scares, and I never once got startled. And I startle more easily than most people. And the reason is that they didn't do it that way. What they did instead is, you're in the house, you've got the flashlight, it's kind of a tense atmosphere, you're rounding a corner, and then a cutscene starts where it just shows your character walking around the corner, and then something jumps out. Well, at that point, the cat's out of the bag, right? When the cutscene starts, you say you're prepared for anything. There's no longer any way that you're going to be caught off guard with a scare like that. Now, cheap jump scares are cheap scares, and I get that, but they still have their value. But when you do it like that, you're not going to scare anybody in a cutscene. The thing about horror video games that makes them so special is when you have agency in those situations, and it's you that's rounding that corner, that's what makes it really scary. When you take that away by putting the jump scare in a cutscene, which is what they did exclusively, I think. I don't think there was... Well, in the very beginning, there were a couple of little jump scares, but they weren't really done very well either. You would look up and it would be like, you know, this violin screech, ring, and you see like but it wasn't like something jumping out or anything. You'd look up and you just see like a hand around the corner, and it was already there. Or you see a boy that was already there, like, and then it does that, ring, and the boy disappears or something. It just wasn't handled well. It just wasn't scary. Not even for me, who startles really easily. So that's problem number one. The game just... The way that it was directed and edited, with the sound design and the way that the scares were handled, they were just handled poorly. It just wasn't a scary game. The very best, closest it got to scary was there were a couple of times when you're like in the city and it's like very Silent Hill looking with the fog everywhere, or when you're in the forest and you can't see far ahead of you. There were some moments that flirted with an atmosphere that was intense, but it just didn't really make it. It just never really made it there, because you knew after an hour of playing, I knew that anytime something was going to jump out, it was either going to be one of those half-ass scares, or it was going to be a cutscene. And so my fear went right out the window pretty quick as soon as I figured out what was going on. So that's problem number one. The game wasn't scary. The story is the fucking maybe dumbest story I've ever heard in a game. I've ever seen and experienced in a game. It doesn't make any fucking sense from start to finish. The way that these characters speak to each other you'd have to kind of see it. You'd have to play it. They don't, the tones, it's like they recorded all of the voice dialogue, not having any idea what the other dialogue was, and that's probably what happened. Like, the story just and the way that it came together, the pacing was so fucked. It's really kind of hard to explain, but it was like the guy's in the house and then he's like, whoa, oh, I guess we're going on an adventure. And then it's just like, oh, we're leaving the house, but there's no real explanation as to why, what we're trying to do. They didn't explain the story well at all. And I read most of the lore until the second half, but like at the beginning when they're setting the story, it just kind of like, oh, we're in the car now. We're just going to go solve a mystery. And at no point did the story ever really come together. It made absolutely zero sense. It wasn't like just a bad story like some horror, like The Bed That Eats People, like some B-horror game. That's a bad story, and there can even be some value in that. This story just didn't make any sense, and there's nothing really fun or scary about that. Technically, let's talk about technically. This game is full of bugs. I got stuck in the environment a bunch. More importantly, enemies got stuck in the environment pretty much constantly. The AI is just piss poor. If there's no obstacles between you and that enemy, it'll probably come towards you. But all you gotta do to get an enemy to stop chasing you is to just put a pole between you, and you're good. Or walk far enough away that the enemy just finds an invisible wall, and then you just stand behind that invisible wall and just shoot them until they die. There was a lot of that. Even in bosses would just run without moving in a corner somewhere. They're trying to run towards you, but they're not moving. They're not actually progressing. There was, I mean, almost every boss, half of them did that. About half of the enemies I killed because they weren't moving toward me. Maybe a quarter of them. It happened a lot. And this is not one of those enemies where there's just one of these games where there's just one enemy every 10 minutes. There were a lot of enemies in this game, and a lot of them were broken. You were clipping in and out of walls all the time. The camera did this thing where, especially if you were in close quarters, like in a house, the camera, if it couldn't reconcile with the viewpoint you're at, it would just go, and the camera angle would just jump forward and backwards. It made me sick a couple of times. The camera was broken. The environment, like when you can interact with things, it was bad. It was really buggy. That's the absolute worst part was the enemy design. The enemy design was, or I mean, not the enemy design, but the enemy AI and the enemy just movement was just straight up just bugged, horribly bugged. What else? The level design was bad. It was 4 out of 10. I mean, I guess it wasn't horrible, but it's really easy to get turned around. It didn't make a lot of sense. There were a lot of areas that didn't serve any purpose. The part, especially in the first half of the game when things weren't as linear and you were like exploring, like there's a police station that you go through. It was badly designed. It didn't make a lot of sense. So there was that. The puzzles. I just got done playing Signalis, which had a survival horror game with excellent puzzles that were almost too hard, but just easy enough that you could figure it out if you put your mind to it enough. This game had puzzles that only existed in two extremes. They either were so obtuse that there was no way. I had to look up some dude's playthrough 3 or 4 times to get through, especially that police station. And there's a couple of things where you have to put in a code or something, and there were multiple times I was like, there is absolutely no effing way I ever would have figured that out, because the puzzle's just really badly made. It's just a badly designed puzzle. And it's not really a puzzle. It's more like you have to know what a code is, and you have to look at a certain thing on the wall to see what the code is, and it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make any sense. So when I looked it up, I was like, I'm really glad I looked that up, because there's no effing way I would have figured. The guy I had watched had to look it up. So that's one extreme. The other extreme is that the puzzle is, a door is locked. You walk into the next room and the key's just on the ground. And then you pick up the key and you walk to the thing. Or you have to get gas for your car, and so you just walk up to a gas can, and then, oh, the gas can's empty. Oh, but there's a car that you can siphon gas from 10 feet from it. So you just do that, and then the car has gas. It's just obstacles in your way that aren't challenges. They're just fucking hurdles that they're just throwing in front of you. And so those are the only two extremes on the puzzles. Ridiculously obtuse and impossible, or not really a puzzle at all, just a fucking obstacle. Have we talked about the voice acting yet? The protagonist's voice acting wasn't horrible. It was badly edited and directed, so it didn't match tonally most of the time. Like, most of the time, it didn't match tonally. But the actual acting itself sounded okay. He was really emotive, probably too emotive, but he was at least, like, sounded genuine most of the time, even though a lot of his tone was misplaced and didn't match the situation and was explaining a story that made no sense. But it sounded okay. The actor seemed okay. The rest of the voice actors were trash. They were all the other voice actors were real bad. They got somebody okay for the protagonist, but the rest of the voice actors. Now his lines were horrible. He would say stuff while he was shooting. What does it say? What did he say? Keep the change, you filthy animal, bro. That's from Home Alone. Like, why is that in my survival horror game? Something about cake. Eat this fucking cake or something. It was, but he sounded okay, right? But the other, and I shouldn't say trash, but the voice acting was subpar. It was not good outside of the protagonist. I don't want to shit on this game too hard because, again, it was really bad and really frustrating. All the bugs and the bad puzzles and the bad environments and the lack of any real substance was really annoying for the first couple hours. And then the last couple hours, it's not a long game. I think it took me about 5 hours to beat it. In the last couple hours, it kind of came together a little bit because the game became more linear. It became simpler. There were less puzzles, fewer puzzles. There were fewer weird level design choices. There were more bosses. It got cooler toward the end, but it never reached the level of true fun. It was really more... The most fun I had was realizing that I was getting close to the end and that this game wasn't hard, and so that I was making progress, and that felt good. Progress always feels good for me, but it wasn't fun. The game wasn't fun. I guess what I think about when I think of a game like this is I think of games like Chasing Static. I think of games like Beside Myself. I think of games like A Place Forbidden. These are smaller indie horror games that weren't very good, but had some value in them at points. This game had a lot more action in it than any of those games, and I didn't hate that at all times. But overall, just whoever made this game, if it's their first game or whatever, good on you for making a video game. But like, if I'm holding this to the standard of the other games I play, and this is bottom of the barrel. It's try again. Good on you for making a video game, but hopefully this game, the process of developing this game, taught your development team a lot of things about how to do better next time. This isn't, for me, much of an outing. It's rife with issues. We haven't even actually discussed all of them, I don't think. Well, we talked about the story, we talked about the bugs, we talked about the technical... we haven't talked about the graphics. The graphics were weird. Oh, I remember the last thing here. This is the last thing I say. I don't want to rant too hard on this game, but I'll button it up with this. I got the distinct feeling playing this game throughout it that if it were possible for ChatGPT to make a game, it would look a lot like this. Everything was very disjointed and uncanny and didn't really make any sense. And it's like, have you ever read any of those ChatGPT like stories where it's like, and then the man brought the pizza to the farmhouse and they ate the pizza and it was tasty and the man jumped for joy and said, I love this pizza. Like this weird it's got this weird cadence. That's what this felt like. It felt like ChatGPT made a game, and it just, when they're explaining the story, I'm just like, what? That doesn't make sense, guys. And then it's like, oh, we must solve the mystery of the grandmother. And then they were suddenly in the car and driving across town. It's just, especially toward the beginning when they're setting up the plot, I just got this distinct feeling that it's just like written by a robot. In order to really understand what I'm saying, I think you'd have to watch a playthrough of it, or you know, dare I say, play it yourself if you want to put yourself through this. Not worth the $30 I paid for it. I'm glad that they didn't try to charge $50 or $60 like Gollum did. This is better than that game. This is better than Lord of the Rings Gollum, for sure. Quite a bit better, but most games are. All right, so you know, we tried. I'm glad we beat it quickly. That's good news. All right, last order of business. Stray Souls. Thanks for trying. But we are now going to delete you from our console. No, I don't want to start you again. Gross. No, I don't want to go to the store either. What the actual fuck? We are now going to uninstall you and never play you again. Bye. Bye. We won't miss you, but again, good try.